I have the pleasure of introducing Rio Peterson, and affectionately known as Rio from Clio. And as most of you probably know, Clio provides practice management software and is across the country. So welcome, Rio.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. Oh, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. Sometimes you never know, right? Living in a Zoom world. So hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here again. I'm speaking to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And can everybody see that okay? Yes? Awesome.
Yep.
I got some head nods. Fantastic. Okay, so today I'm going to be giving you a Clio Legal Trends Report update. We've got a lot of new research that's come out in the past year in response to COVID, and particularly where solo and small firms are concerned. So I'm going to be sharing some of those insights with all of you today. And so, as William mentioned, I am Rio from Clio, and I'm the Affinity Partnerships Manager at Clio. So that means that I get to work with all of the law societies, bar associations that we are partners with across North America. And a big part of my job is doing a lot of public speaking and sharing a lot of the data and information that Clio has to really help set law firms up for success and to help them make informed decisions about the best ways to run their practice so that they are not just surviving, but thriving. Okay, so today I'm going to give you a little overview of what we'll be talking about. So first, we are going to take a look at the situation for solo and small firms and how they have fared throughout COVID. Second, we're going to take a look at how client expectations have shifted in response to the pandemic. And third, we'll be talking about strategies for business growth during the pandemic and beyond. And by business growth, I mean, either earning more revenue, finding more clients, or both. That can look a lot different depending on your firm. So we'll be talking about a lot of different options there. And, as part of the discussion, I'll be sharing some information and lessons from Clio's Legal Trends Report research for solo lawyers, and then talking about how to implement some of the tech tools that we've identified as being real game changers. Okay, so Clio's Legal Trends Report, you've likely heard me mention it several times, but for those of you who haven't, I'll give you a little bit of a background on it. So the Legal Trends Report is what we've been publishing annually since 2016. And what's really interesting about it is that there is no other place in the legal industry where you can find this kind of in-depth data. So it's something that is very unique to Clio. So what I'd like to point out are two different things. So there's a lot of information that exists in the Legal Trends Report. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of it today, not even close. That would take quite a while. We'd all be here all day. So I will keep it short. But if you would like to read the Legal Trends Report, you can definitely access them for free. The easiest thing to do is to Google Clio Legal Trends, and you'll be taken to a page where you can read all of the different reports totally free, download them as PDFs and pore over them. It's a lot of really valuable information to be gained. And so the second thing I want to point out is how unique the data and information within these reports really is, because it comes from three very important data inputs that allow us to get a complete picture of current trends in the legal industry. So the first kind of input is from Clio App Data, and this refers to aggregated and anonymized data that is contributed from the tens of thousands of lawyers and legal professionals that use Clio. So there's always, a bit of concern when we mention this data point, concerns about privacy and confidentiality. So I'll clarify by saying that this data does not include any identifiable client information, no firm information, and participation is 100% optional. So for example, with billable rates, we produce a lot of information about billable rates across the country, across North America. And in doing that, we are able to see which rates are being set, but we're not able to see which firms are setting those rates, which clients are being charged those rates, but we are able to see a bell curve of kind of all the rates that are set between, say, $20 and $2,000 and which geographic location they're in. So we're able to make determinations based on that bell curve. So that's an example of how we kind of aggregate and anonymize the data that's being voluntarily contributed by law firms that are using Clio. And one of the great things about that is that there's no other place in the world that has the volume and specificity of data that we're able to represent today, and that I'm able to share with you today. So it's always a very exciting thing for me to be able to, share this information. And so because that insight, has never existed before, there's a huge opportunity for legal professionals to take advantage of it. And so not only do we provide, Clio App or use Clio App Data, but we also do surveys of legal professionals and interpret a lot of information that comes from both qualitative and quantitative results from practicing lawyers throughout the United States. So lastly, we also do surveys of the US general population, specifically focusing on their legal needs and their actions as legal consumers. So there's a lot that goes into these reports. Okay, so now that I've kind of talked about where this information is coming from, let's talk about the situation for solo lawyers. And one of the things that was really interesting about the last year is that because Clio invested so heavily in data operations, we were actually able to get real-time data insights into how law firms were being impacted by COVID and the steps that were being taken across different jurisdictions in order to minimize its impact. So the very first thing we saw, and especially when it came to impacting solos, was that casework amongst solo lawyers fell 32% in April of 2020 compared to the previous year, which I don't think is a surprise to anybody. April was a very difficult month, kind of across the board. So it's not a surprise that those fell. And we did see caseloads slowly begin to recover during the summer months. But even with that slight recovery, revenue still dropped for solos, down 19% compared to the year before. So we saw a decrease in the number of incoming cases and in the amount of revenue that would be derived from those cases. And so when we compare new casework and revenue of solo firms to non-solo firms, we actually saw that non-solo firms experienced a 7% greater drop in cases and revenue than the solo firms. And so what that tells us is that solo firms and solo lawyers were a bit more effective than larger firms with more lawyers. And what's interesting about that, and what's also interesting is that not all law firms struggled through 2020. In fact, many were actually able to find a way to increase their business. So these graphs show two distinct cohorts. So solo firms, which are represented in blue, and non-solo firms, which are represented in orange. And so these two distinct cohorts were able to achieve year-over-year growth in casework and revenue, despite the strain of the pandemic. And specifically, these graphs compare the use of certain technology solutions that focus on different areas of law firm client experiences. And we actually looked at a wide range of technologies and how they impact law firm operations and success. And we were able to identify 3 specific technologies that made a positive difference to these law firms. And those were electronic payments, client relationship management software, or client intake software, and client portals. So I'll talk more about those kind of towards a little bit later in the presentation. But when comparing the overall revenue advantages between these different groups over the course of 2020, we can see that solo firms using all 3 technologies actually earned about $50,000 more in additional revenue per lawyer than firms that were not using these 3 technologies. And that's roughly about $14,000 more additional revenue per lawyer than the larger firms, which is quite an advantage and a pretty amazing success story considering the challenges that COVID presented. So we'll dig more into that in just a little bit, but I'm also going to talk about these technologies in a moment, but I would like to share some data on how COVID has really changed the practice of law for solo lawyers. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of research in 2020 on lawyers and consumers to gauge how they're thinking and feeling and adapting to COVID. And as you can see, we talked to a ton of people, a lot of legal professionals, and did a lot of general population studies. So each of these 1,000 people that we talked to every month were different and unique sets of people and legal professionals. And in terms of legal professionals, we reached out to solo lawyers, non-solo lawyers, just to get the whole range of experiences. And what we found through all of this research was really, really interesting, because the first thing we found was what, lawyers and what solo lawyers were experiencing was very similar to what was being reflected kind of internally at Clio, which was that there was a lot of concern and uncertainty about the current situation. So among solo lawyers, we found that we surveyed, we found that they are very concerned about the success of their legal practice. So 66% were feeling concerned about their success. And almost half, so 47%, said that they're concerned about making a living at all. So, if you or your members are solo lawyers out there and they're wondering, like, am I alone? I feel alone. I'm really worried. They're not alone. There are plenty more out there who are experiencing those same levels of stress and uncertainty. And so one more thing that we found is that, as resilient as solos are, there's also a lot of concern about making sure that clients can pay them, because a lot of clients, as we know, were and are currently losing work. Their financial situations are very different than what they were over a year ago. And this is reflected clearly in the way that solos are perceiving the way that their clients are interacting with them in terms of payments. So 72% of solos that we surveyed say that they're concerned their clients won't be able to pay them, which is a big concern to have, especially if you're trying to make a living during a pandemic. And so if you, again, are a solo lawyer, or you have members who are solo lawyers and they feel like they're worried they're not going to make money, they're worried they're not going to last, 3 out of 4 lawyers are also worried about that same thing. And again, there's real reasons for this concern. It's not just based on this general fear and uneasiness about the pandemic. These concerns are based on actual experiences that solo lawyers are having. And, they reflect the rationale for this worry. 60% of solos that we surveyed reported seeing a decrease in the number of clients who were just reaching out to their firms to begin with. And 24%, so that's 1 in 4 solo lawyers out there, had to forfeit revenue by June of 2020. So this is right, when the pandemic was first starting to hit, the first wave was kind of hitting everyone. And, in addition to that, 15% of those surveyed said that they had to lay off staff by July of last year. So it didn't really take long for a lot of lawyers and for solo lawyers to have to let go of support staff, or perhaps even another attorney they were working with. So again, these are very widespread experiences. So then the question becomes, like, what do solo lawyers do now? How do they adjust and evolve and address some of these concerns? So a lot of what I do for a living, and ultimately the goal of the Clio Legal Trends Report, is to try to understand. Oh, someone's got to mute. So a lot of what Clio does for a living is try to understand what information is needed for businesses like legal practices to make the right decisions. And a major motivation for us to do the research that we do is just to get some information to help solo lawyers, just like you, just like your members, to help make the right choices and be able to navigate something like the pandemic, and to be able to navigate that in a way that is successful. Okay. All right. So with that, let's shift our focus and kind of talk about the other side of this equation. So we've talked about how COVID has impacted legal professionals and solo lawyers, but what about legal consumers? What about clients? How have client expectations shifted as a result of the pandemic? And so for law firms that are struggling in times of disruption, or even in times of, relative normalcy, it's important to assess the market and identify what people are looking for. And one of the most significant shifts that we've seen in the past year is that consumers have adopted technology at a rapid pace. And not only that, but that adoption of technology has also led to a shift in the way that legal consumers, potential clients, think about the law, the way that they think about lawyers, and the way that they interact with lawyers. And the information that's really crucial to understand is, what is the end consumer really thinking and feeling? What is that client that you're serving or that you may serve in the future? What are they going through? And how is that affecting the way that they are interacting with you? So here's what we found. So no surprise, a major finding was that 58% of consumers that we surveyed, and this is people age 18 and above, said that technology is more important to them now than it was before the coronavirus pandemic. So just imagine how important technology was before. I mean, maybe not to all of us, but there is a large group of people out there who cannot live without it. And so it was very important before the pandemic. Well, now it's even more important to over half of the population. And in addition to this, just imagine, how much we were using technology before. Well, the types of technology that people are using are starting to broaden. So things like Zoom, and other kind of tech tools are starting to kind of make their way into people's daily lives. So 50% of consumers say that they are more comfortable with technology than they were before, and 52% say they are using more types of technology. So I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I think it's safe to say that this behavior is likely going to stick around. This comfort with technology isn't going to just suddenly disappear or go away if things, hopefully when things return back to normal. The use of these different tech tools has become such an integral part of how people are engaging. So it's quite a major shift, and it not only shows up in the way that they engage with each other or at work, but it also shows up in the way that they want to engage with legal professionals. And that's not surprising because, again, it is in every aspect of their life. So why shouldn't it also apply to the way that they're working with their lawyers? So 56% of the consumers that we interviewed said that they prefer video conferencing with a lawyer over a phone call. And 65% of consumers prefer paying for legal services electronically. So again, we can see that the adoption of technology is influencing how consumers prefer to work with their law firms. Now, if you think about inertia in human behavior and sticking with habits and behaviors that you've done before, this shift in technology usage has created new behaviors and preferences that are probably going to stick around for some time, if not for most of these consumers. These things, wanting video conferencing, wanting electronic payments, they're not going to go away once the pandemic is over. So something that I find really interesting about these kind of numbers that are up on the screen right now is that back in 2018, we actually surveyed legal consumers on how they preferred to interact with their lawyers. And there were certain activities where they're like, yeah, I really want to be in the office, in person with these lawyers. But now we have this more recent data, which has shown this massive shift, basically in the opposite direction, showing that, legal consumers actually now want to be doing things differently. So it'll be really easy to see how, things in a year from now, just how much of this will stick around. And, I don't want, you guys, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm thinking about calling friends now, and I'm thinking about, chatting with my mom on the phone, who I haven't seen in, oh my gosh, over a year, it's not just the phone that I go to. Zoom is also an option. That's also a second option. So these are definitely kind of ways that technology has been pulled into people's lives more closely than perhaps it was before. So, and, I know that I keep saying there's like another interesting thing. Well, it is really interesting. There's lots of fascinating information in here. And something that I do think is really profound, especially given people's concern with security and privacy of their legal information, was that despite those concerns, 69% of consumers prefer working with a lawyer who can share documents electronically, which is pretty incredible. That number has definitely changed since 2018. So even things like sharing agreements with them, using e-signature portals, these are things that are being preferred more and more. And they're seen as much more convenient, but also in this day and age, and in lieu of stay-at-home orders and not being able to actually be in person, they're just becoming the more preferred way to go because it just simplifies things and lets us get on with our daily lives, even though we can't leave our houses. So, I work with a lot of solo lawyers and a lot of attorneys, and I find this is something that stuck out to me quite a bit in this edition of the Legal Trends Report, is that despite the benefits of adopting technology, solo attorneys and solo lawyers are slower at adopting than other practitioners. And the reason why this is kind of so surprising is that because, as I mentioned, like I work with solo attorneys, solo lawyers on a daily basis. I work on different projects with them. I work on a lot of meetups, a lot of CLE and CPD presentations, and I've always found that the solos that I work with are so adaptive and resilient and agile in the way that they engage with their practice and their practice management, that to see this slower rate of adoption was like, just didn't really seem to line up with my personal experiences. But when we look at the data across different types of technology uses, uses of technology software to organize your practice, to accept a lot of electronic payments, et cetera, we can see that solo firms are doing it. They are adopting technology, but at a much slower rate than non-solo firms. And the difference isn't too huge, but it is consistent across all of these categories. So it is something to note. And again, there are probably really very significant reasons why solos are not doing this. And again, it might not make sense for every practice to adopt tech tools. However, if you think about the way that consumers and legal consumers are engaging with the law, it's very important to point out that a firm can very quickly fall behind if they don't adapt. But if there's one thing that I know that solos are, it's definitely resilient. So I would anticipate that it's very likely that these adoptions will happen in the future. It's just a matter of time. So now that we've looked at both sides of this equation, and we've talked about the impact COVID has had on solo lawyers, and we've looked at the shift in client expectations, let's talk about some strategies for helping solo lawyers, helping your members build thriving practices now and in the future. And so these strategies really center around leveraging those three key technologies that I mentioned earlier. So they were client intake and legal CRM, so client relationship management software, online payments, and client portals. So again, if you're going to be reading the Legal Trends Report for solos in particular, there is a breakdown of the specifics of how each of these individual technologies can impact a law firm. So we've broken it down based on each one. And we've also looked at the numbers for how all three can impact law firms. But I really want to highlight that, if you're looking through this or you've shared this with your members and they're looking through this, don't feel rushed to just go out and implement all three of these things all at once. Just go out there and let's get all this stuff going. Let's make it happen, because you're actually going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be too much. And there's a lot of value in just adopting one of these things at a time, even just starting with something small and simple, because even just leveraging a little bit of technology can have major returns on investment for law firms. So again, read the report, see which tools you would think would have the most impact for yourself, for your firms, for your members' firms, and just don't worry about implementing everything all at once. That's not what we're here for. So if we look at this graph in front of us, this is a year-over-year change in matter volume and revenue comparing solos and non-solo firms. So the solid lines represent solo firms and the dotted lines represent other firms. And what we see over time is that the solid blue line shows how much more solo law firms that were using these three technologies were able to earn versus other firms. And we can see that solo firms using these three technologies were able to almost consistently outperform firms that were not using them in terms of matter volume. And were able to not only earn more revenue, but to increase their revenue as the pandemic progressed, which I think is a pretty big thing to celebrate, honestly, given the challenges of the last year and a bit. So I showed this to you before, right? But let's take another look. So for firms that were already leaning into these technologies and already had them implemented, we saw that solo firms here in the dark blue were earning an average of $27,000 more per attorney than firms that were not using these. And so it's just a lot more revenue in their pockets right there. And then we moved into 2020, we see that there's about this $50,000 amount in estimated revenue being earned by solo lawyers that have leaned into these technologies and really leveraged them. And especially when compared to the larger firms who are only earning about $37,000 more per lawyer. So there's some huge gains that are being made by solo law firms by implementing these technologies and really using them for their clients, with their clients, and on behalf of their clients. So let's dig into a little bit what these three technologies are. I'll give you just a brief kind of overview of them. And so the first one I want to talk about is intake software. And now earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that 56% of consumers would prefer video conferencing over a phone call. Right? And so this is a clear indication that clients are increasingly seeing the need for remote interactions even before they meet a lawyer. So client intake software and client relationship management software offer some incredibly powerful tools that can help solo lawyers give the appearance of being available 24/7 and 24 hours, 7 days a week to filter requests coming in from potential new clients. So they can offer you things like online scheduling tools, which allow potential clients to book consultations. You have the ability to control your calendar, so they can't just set up meetings with you anytime, but it's very handy in giving potential clients that ability to book a time with you that works best for them, and you don't have to sit there and try to book it with them. It's a major time saver. They also provide features like automated email follow-ups. So let's say that somebody who's looking for a lawyer is on the internet at 2 a.m. and they send you an inquiry via email. Well, your system can automatically reply to them. So right there, they've gotten a response. They know that somebody is going to get to them soon. And that is a major selling point for anybody looking for a lawyer. There's some other legal trends data that I love to point out, and it's that we did in 2019, and it's that 59% of legal consumers reaching out to a law firm expect a response within 24 hours. I mean, that's crazy. That's a majorly fast turnaround time. I don't even think some of the biggest companies out there can provide that kind of turnaround. But if you have an intake software set up, you can offer that kind of response time, and that's going to be a major up over the competition. So not only do they have things like automated emails, but they also make data collection really, really simple. So you can create your own intake forms and share them with prospective clients. They can enter all of their information for you, and then you can link that to your practice management software. And I mean, you've just saved so much time. And as a solo or small firm, even a couple minutes saved on each task is going to add up to a big amount of efficiency improvement and time saving, and give you way more time to do what you actually went to school for, which is practicing law. Right. So this is kind of a brief overview of intake software, but those are some of the ways that it can really help a small firm level up their ability to accept new clients, to source new clients, and to make sure that they are responding and bringing in new clients on a consistent basis. Okay, so next let's talk about online payments. Now, these became incredibly important when it became very difficult to meet people in person. It's very hard to accept a cash payment or even a check if you're not able to be in person. So this really is just a major, it's just a requirement at this point. It is really just something that every firm should have in place, is this ability to not only offer the ability to pay with electronic payments, but also to offer flexible payment plans. And the firms that are bouncing back the quickest from COVID are those that are able to accept online payments and are able to kind of leverage that throughout their client base. We see that 72% of consumers would like or prefer to work with a law firm that accepted online payments or payment plans. And 52% of law firms are actually equipped to do that. So that's a major opportunity to just get signed up accepting on electronic payments makes life so much easier for you and your clients. And not only does it make life easier, but we're also seeing law firms start to offer a greater range of pricing and payment options than ever before. And in Canada, this is something that is catching on very slowly. The law societies, while they don't necessarily say no to alternative fee structures and payment plans, they haven't quite jumped on board the way that US law firms have. But these alternative fee structures offering payment plans, offering lower prices, offering high volume kind of flat fee services are ways that, number one, increase access to justice, but also provide firms with a much more consistent revenue stream, which when you have consistent revenue, makes it very easy to navigate the times when things are crazy and people might not be able to afford more expensive legal services. Okay, and so last but not least, client portals. This is a newer kind of technology in addition to the legal industry, but they have a kind of a dramatic impact on helping firms grow. So something that can be a major pain point for small law firms is being able to provide their actual hired clients with timely updates and regular communications, right? That's a lot of work, particularly if you don't have an assistant or somebody helping you. But once engaged, these portals give clients a place to find all of their case information, their invoices, tasks you've assigned to them. They can share documents with you. It's all right there, and they can log in anytime to get updates. And our research has shown that strong communication is very important to clients. So this is a major selling point when you're engaging clients. They don't have to call you to get an update. They don't have to track you down or interrupt you on your day. They can log in, boom, all their updates are right there. And I think that would be, for me, something that I would really lean towards if I was looking for a legal professional. They're just a very unique and powerful tool that saves so much time and provides such a solid client experience. Okay, so we've kind of, talked about all of these different tools, all of this research and data. And now I know I mentioned before that this information and data that I've shared is specific to the US legal industry. So these are all surveys done with US attorneys, US legal consumers. So you're probably sitting here wondering, how is this relevant to the Canadian legal industry? And that's a really fair question. But it is so important to remember a few points. And I've said this before, and I'm just going to keep saying it until it happens. So the first one is that the insights and information found in a legal trends report are relevant and applicable to lawyers everywhere. COVID has impacted everybody in North America, everybody in the world. And legal services that were perceived as inaccessible before COVID are now perceived as especially inaccessible to Canadians who are out of work, living paycheck to paycheck, whose financial future is very uncertain. So leveraging technology to provide better client experiences, run more efficient, profitable law firms, and make legal services more accessible are lessons that are valuable regardless of which side of the border you are practicing law on. And the second is that we can have this type of data and information specific to Canadian law firms. It is possible, but we have to start encouraging technology adoption among Canadian lawyers. Now, I've mentioned this before, but we are about 10 years behind the US in terms of technology adoption for law firms. And a huge reason for that was the kind of, I don't want to say reluctance, but the hesitancy on the part of law societies to move forward and guide the evolution of the practice of law by adopting a duty of technological competence. So whereas the US adopted their duty of tech competency in 2012, it took us until 2020 to finally make that happen. And I'm so happy to see actually that Rule 3.1-2 has been updated to include actual references to technology competence. So the point is that the only reason that we are able to provide this level of insight into the US legal industry is because they use the technology. And that technology allows us to harvest data and share it with the wider legal community. And I would love, it's like I've said this before to you guys, and I will keep saying it, but I would absolutely love to be able to present a Canadian specific legal trends report. But it's not going to happen unless we can encourage Canadian lawyers to use tech. And, as law associations, you are in such an incredibly perfect position to move that initiative forward and to empower all of your members to leverage tools that exist, to leverage these technology tools that are there for them so they can build law firms that won't just survive in the future, they'll actually thrive. So with that, I thank you all. If there's any questions, I am more than happy to answer them. I'd love to hear them. And in the meantime, I've got a slide. If you want to check out the legal trends report, here is the email, or no, the email, the website address, and go ahead and read them. They are free and there for you.
Any questions?
Any questions? Oh, let's see. There's actually one in the chat. Okay, so is Clio working on any reports that would assist its users in preparation of the LSO filings based on the data that is in a Clio managed practice? Yes, actually, Corey, we have a team that is currently working with the Law Society of Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia to ensure that we are able to produce consistent correct reportings to help attorneys obviously use our product more efficiently in Canada. So if you are interested in helping with that, please let me know. I can connect you with our product manager who is in charge of that. That would be very, very helpful. Yeah, Corey,
Definitely.
I see you nodding. So yes,
Yep.
that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Rio, for your informative and, as always, energetic presentation. It's a little pick-me-up after lunch, so thank you very much for that.
Oh, happy to help.
And thank you to Clio for sponsoring. And once again, this portion of our program is accredited for professionalism hours. So we are going to take a break now until 2:40, so about 10 minutes. And we will start up at that point so everybody can get up and get their extra steps in.